If you would like to listen to or download any or all of Power at Work's podcasts in podcast form, they are available for streaming and download on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast. Just search Power at Work on any podcast platform and enjoy all of Power at Work's podcasts. While you're there, two things we would like you to do. First, subscribe, and that way you won't miss any Power at Work podcasts. Second, please give Power at Work a 5-star rating, a like, a love, whatever is the tool that your podcast provider gives you. It helps others who care about workers and worker power to find Power at Work's content. They will be grateful, and so will we. Hello, powerful people, and welcome back to the Power Half Hour, live on LinkedIn and published for posterity on poweratwork.us. I'm Seth Harris from the Burns Center for Social Change. I've got an expert panel of 3 guests who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. Our video audience, of course, can see them arrayed in front of you. The panelists are going to talk about the big stories and the biggest developments affecting worker power, workers, and unions, and they're going to tell us about some important worker power developments that are going to arrive sometime in the near-term future. And then at the very end, it's just a little thank you. I mean, teeny tiny, really eensy-weensy little thank you to our guests. We're going to give them a few minutes at the end of the show for shameless plugs and shout-outs. They can promote anyone or anything they would like, and self-promotion is enthusiastically welcomed. And then, audience, if you are hungry for more, stay with us for the Power Half Hour overtime. We'll take questions and comments from our live audience, and we will also ask questions that were sent to us by email to Power at Work over the course of the last 2 weeks. Now, that's going to happen during overtime in about 28 minutes. 2 more things before we get started, audience. First, the next episode of the Power Half Hour will be live on Tuesday, September 8th at noon Eastern Time. So we're breaking our pattern a little bit. It will not be in 2 weeks. It will be in 3 weeks. We're going to give you a longer lead in to Labor Day. You want to spend some time preparing your Labor Day celebration, working with your brothers and sisters and other siblings in the labor movement to figure out how you're going to celebrate Labor Day. We're giving you some additional time, an extra hour or so to do that. So we will see you the day after Labor Day, Tuesday, September 8th at noon Eastern Time, here on LinkedIn or on poweratwork.us. Second, please follow Power at Work on LinkedIn and subscribe to Power at Work on poweratwork.us. There's lots of ways to follow Power at Work on social media. Okay, let's meet our panel. From the city where the West begins, Fort Worth, Texas. He's a professor of law and the director of the Workplace Law Program at Texas A&M School of Law. And all gussied up for the first week of classes, it's Michael Z. Green. Welcome back, Professor.
Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And from the Emerald City of Seattle, Washington, she's an assistant professor of law at Seattle University Law School, where she leads the Workers' Rights Clinic. It's Elizabeth Ford. Hello, Liz.
Hi, nice to be here.
Great to have you. And rounding out our all-academic panel, we didn't plan it that way. It just happened to work out that way. This is the mix of people who happen to come up in our barrel when we spin the chips. From the outskirts of Morristown, New Jersey, she's the executive director of the Worker Institute at Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. It's our friend and partner, Patricia Campos-Medina. Welcome back, Patricia.
Thank you for having me again. This is always fun.
Oh. Every time we ask you, if you say yes, we're just going to keep asking you. I keep telling you that, and you still say yes. I don't know why you do that. All right, panel, topic number 1. Michael, I'm going to start with you on this one. We're going to look over our shoulder. We're going to look in our rearview mirror. We're going to make an assessment. What was the most important, most interesting, biggest news story relating to unions, worker power, and worker collective action over the last couple of weeks? Michael.
All right, Seth. I hope that I'm not a little bit too edgy today. I was in New York for a conference, and for some reason they canceled my flight because of weather, and then American Airlines swore they couldn't get me back home for at least 2 more days. So that might have contributed to my edge right here. But I think the thing that stuck out to me over the last couple of weeks was a case decided in my beloved Texas, a federal district court decision called Ambridge Employee Service Corporation. And it involves this issue regarding the National Labor Relations Board and whether it is unconstitutional or not unconstitutional. I know your last Power at Work, the great Ann LaFazzo, kind of talked a little bit about this in one of the audience questions, but mine is a little more nuanced, a little more focused about what's going to happen in Texas. To sever or not to sever is really the question regarding the unconstitutionality. And now we have a conflict among district court decisions in Ambridge, where Ambridge, the federal district court Texas judge, says, oh, you can just keep going on. You can sever the unconstitutional portions, where there was another decision not too long ago in Aunt Bertha's where federal district court said you can't really sever the unconstitutional provisions. So for me, that's a percolating issue. I'm probably going to get more edgy in the second question you ask about what this really means, but that's something that stuck out to me over the last couple of weeks. It was decided on July 27th. And people have been talking about it this month.
So let's just put a finer point on what you mean by severance. So what the parts of the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act, which is our private sector labor law, that are being attacked as unconstitutional are the ways in which the board members and the administrative law judges are appointed and the job protections that they have, meaning there are limits on the president's ability to remove them, right? That is where the unconstitutionality allegedly comes in.
Yeah.
The question is, can you say those provisions are unconstitutional, but the rest of the NLRA survives? Everything else exists. The NLRB exists. The protections against retaliation exist. The way in which workers vote for a union, the representation election system, that exists. And so what you're telling us is the district courts in Texas, who are subject to a decision of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit saying the National Labor Relations Act is unconstitutional, are trying to figure out what that means, and they are disagreeing about that. Do I have that right?
You are absolutely correct that they are disagreeing, and at least in the context of what does it mean in the broader context is no one's really talking about the ALJ part of it, which is going to be something I'm going to raise in the second part of this. But we are talking about, the NLRB members is kind of like everything is back to usual. You got a Republican president, they get their majority, they've got one minority member, that's all. But no one's talking about the ALJ issue. And that is really the crucial thing to me. And this severance debate, how do you deal with the fact that the ALJs are still around? They still have civil service protection. And if they process a decision, what does that mean? Shouldn't every employer in the Fifth Circuit run into it and say, this is unconstitutional? So that's my issue.
Yeah. Can I just say I really like edgy Michael Green. I'm used to gentlemanly Michael Green, but I like the edge. I'm good with it. All right. Speaking of edgy, Elizabeth Ford, what is the biggest, most important, most interesting development affecting workers, worker power, and unions over the last couple of weeks?
All right, I'm going to bring you news from Washington State, specifically the Washington Supreme Court, which issued a decision on July 9th in a case called Bolina versus AssureCare, and it invalidated the statutory exemption into Washington's minimum wage and other minimum standards for workers who sleep or reside on the work premises. So so to give you a little background, that exclusion, which is not unique to Washington, effectively disentitled many domestic workers, residential managers, apartment managers, Washington's minimum wage, overtime, rest breaks, paid sick leave on the basis that they sleep on the premises. The workers who sleep on the premises, as you might are disproportionately caregivers and domestic workers, and therefore disproportionately low paid, often immigrants, and sometimes have their very housing tied to their work. And so, extraordinarily vulnerable group of people. In this case, the Assure Care workers were employees of an adult family home. Adult family homes are sort of smaller locations for folks who cannot live independently to be still in their community, living in a small sort of residential type setting. The caregivers there were required to sleep on premise. The employer provided room and board, that is the accommodations such as they were free. And the workers also were required to work 24 hours a day, right, and be available to the residents at any time. So this effectively meant that these workers were not sleeping. Often they slept sitting up in chairs, because it's not unusual for them to be called in the middle of the night. So the workers relied on a 2020 Washington case called Martinez Cuevas versus Brothers, which was a case about dairy workers, in which the workers argued that the exclusion for agricultural workers was a sort of separate exclusion, but the same argument that it was unconstitutional under Washington's Constitution. They were successful in that, and the basis for that was sadly not equal protection. It wasn't based on the fact of the workers' vulnerability, their overwhelming status as immigrants. It was based on a sort of a reading of the Privileges and Immunities Clause in Washington's Constitution. So Assure Care workers came along and made the same argument. They said, we are like agricultural workers in that providing this care is unusually dangerous. That's the sort of standard under the Washington Constitution. The employer said, "Oh, no, come on. We are actually, even though we're flat rate, because we're providing room and board, it all works out. It's minimum wage because of all the stuff we're providing." They also argued some version of adult family homes are important, and you should not make us, you'll make us go out of business. A familiar argument to all of us. After a bruising oral argument, the court issued its decision in July, agreeing with workers, finding the exemption to be unconstitutional on the same basis that in the Deruta Brothers case. While the majority of the invitation to acknowledge discriminatory roots of the exclusion, one justice wrote a beautiful concurrence, sort of laying all of that out. So I think this is progress. And though it applies only to adult family home workers, the logic does seem to me to extend further than that.
Boy, that is an unbelievable story. Thank you for sharing that. That is a truly,
of course.
I had absolutely no idea that there was that exclusion in the law. There are other parts of the country have related issues. Claudia Irizarry Aponte has reported on a similar issue in New York City. And we definitely dealt with related issues in the companionship exemption at the federal level, the companionship exemption to the minimum wage and overtime. But boy, that the old version of the law now changed by the state Supreme Court. Disturbing, really disturbing, but it's great to see that justice for those workers done. All right, Patricia, what is the biggest, most important, most interesting development story event of the last couple of weeks affecting workers and worker power?
This is always so hard to pinpoint one, but I always try to add a little, the big picture to the discussions here. So I'm going to say that the biggest, one of the issues that is impacting and will impact, the labor movement and workers in the United States is the Supreme Court allowing President Trump to end temporary protective status for the 1.6 million workers who are here legally from different countries, but who have employed here for the last 20, 30 years. And I think that determination is just a blow for the immigrants communities who have been fighting for a right to belong, a right to have a path for citizenship. Remember that workers with TPS, temporary protected status, are here working legally. 1.6 million workers have the ability to work legally. And the biggest group impact was Haitians, because they don't have any other path for legalization. 360,000 of those workers last week were told that they are ready to be deported. The Governor Hochul sent a letter to the Trump administration, actually spelling out the level of economic disruption that deporting Haitians will create to certain industries, which is in the healthcare industry, and because they are predominantly people who work in hospitals, who are taking care of the elderly, who are home care workers. So they have this. They work in those industries, so they're disrupting the entire industry. And what's coming next is the ending of TPS for Salvadorans. That is supposed to end on September 9th, given what was decided with Haitians. Those 300,000 Salvadorans who have had TPS since the 1990s because of our failure to grant them political asylum in the 80s, will also lose their temporary protected status. Those workers are mainly concentrated on construction and on the service industry and on the logistics industry. So the connection here is that many of them are union members. So a lot of unions are really invested in figuring out how to protect them at this moment. So why this is important to workers in the labor movement, because it's not just the deportation politics of Donald Trump, but it's also the delegalization of workers who have the right to work in this country. We are basically stripping up the right to do it without any fault of their own, other that they're not European, they're not white, they're coming from Haiti, El Salvador, and countries that Donald Trump himself called bad.
Yeah, we're not going to use
countries.
We don't. Yeah. Let's not use that word.
But I just want to. Yeah, but it's redefining the stakes. We used to just have to worry about the workers who are undocumented. Now we actually have to also fight this battle to protect workers who have been legally here and no longer will be able to be legally in this country. So it's a big legalization campaign, and it's impacting unions directly.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to jump in with one of my own. I usually don't do that, but there was such a huge development that I feel I want to shine a light on it. 3 union locals of the Service Employees Union in California have been organizing rideshare drivers under a new law enacted by the California state legislature that allows these drivers to have organizing rights. They are not treated as employees who are covered by the National Labor Relations Act. They are treated as independent contractors. So the state created its own collective bargaining law, organizing and collective bargaining law for those workers. The law allows that if they can get 30% of the drivers to sign up for the union, they automatically get recognition. There does not have to be an election. They reached that threshold last week, and there is now a rideshare drivers union in California. And not only is there a union, it's a union where they had a certified list of 100,000 drivers, which would make it, I believe, the largest union organizing success campaign in American history. But the reality is that it's not 100,000. It's much more likely 350,000 workers. I've seen estimates that have gone as high as 800,000. I think 350 might be more like it, but I don't really know. A lot of people drive for Uber and Lyft, and that's who we're talking about here. The companies are not only not challenging this effort to organize and are not opposing it and are not seeking to sue to overturn the collective bargaining law, but are going along with this organizing effort. And let me just say, bargaining is going to begin shortly. Bargaining is more constrained in this context. They cannot bargain as widely as a union in the private sector ordinarily would be able to do. But an immense, epical organizing success in California. And let me add one more thing to it. That's on top of the organizing success that SEIU's Local 32BJ and the International Association of Machinists have had in Massachusetts, where they have organized, I believe the number is between 70 and 80,000 rideshare drivers, and the success that the labor movement has had in Illinois in passing legislation that will allow their rideshare drivers to organize. So it is possible at the end of all of this that there could be 5 or 6 or 700,000 new union members, all organized, or at least being recognized, because the organizing in California has been going on for a decade. So congratulations to SEIU for its unbelievable resilience and perseverance in that effort. And also to the machinists in SEIU in Massachusetts, also for their perseverance and their success. But we could have 5 to 700,000, maybe more, new union members in the course of a few years. That is an extraordinary turnaround in union membership in the United States, and it means more resources, more power for workers, more opportunity to organize. Every single blue state in the country that has a blue trifecta, governor and state legislature, needs to pass legislation right now that allows their rideshare drivers to organize, because as you can tell, they're desperate to do it. Okay. That's my speech of the day. I'm not going to have another one, I don't think. All right, topic number two, guests. Get out your crystal balls, get your telescope out so you can look down the road and tell us what's coming our way. What are the big stories, the big developments, the big events, the big innovations that will affect workers, worker power, and unions in the near-term future? Elizabeth.
Yes. Well, I'm glad that I go first because this builds on what you just talked about. And so my prediction for what's coming is, and in some ways I'm manifesting here. Like I'm not, I'm in the great tradition of Taylor Swift. I
believe that's our first ever Taylor Swift reference on the Power Half Hour, but that's okay. Big fans. Go ahead.
Maybe I'm precisely the wrong person because, like, if you asked me about Taylor Swift songs, I would not be able to answer. So state laws on sectoral bargaining coming. This is my manifestation for the future. And given, Seth, what you just described, I think it is here a little bit and coming a lot more. And so we have been talking a lot on this program and other programs about the necessity to build state law bulwarks against the disintegration of the National Labor Relations Board and the National Relations Act. And we've been talking about, sort of wholesale moving bargaining. And I've been talking a lot about state law minimum standards protections. And this idea binds the two. The Center for Labor and a Just Economy just published its model legislation guide for creating state law sectoral bargaining. And so that organization is so wonderful, and the folks involved in this particular project are amazing. They include a whole list of heavy hitters, but let me just highlight a few. Jennifer Russo, so the former general counsel for the National Labor Relations Board, Kate Andrews, brilliant scholar from Yale, Seema Nanda, the former solicitor for the Department of Labor, and Senator Karen Kaiser from our own Washington State, who was a legislator for 30 years and wonderful, brilliant, chaired the labor committee there. Okay, so what would this do? So it means that workers across industry, like app-based drivers, but others, could negotiate together for minimum pay and other standards. It creates a state-level board whose job it would be to facilitate those negotiations, to facilitate the process of selecting a representative. And it would act a lot like the National Labor Relations Board, but across sectors. And the question that Seth so beautifully just described is, like, how does this build worker power? Well, the report from the Center for Labor and a Just Economy points to the Center for American Progress report that says that this type of bargaining could double collective bargaining coverage in the United States, right? And maybe even more based on what's happening in the big driver space. So how would it work? So the legislation answers all those sort of picky, detailed questions about how do the mechanics of this work? I won't go into everything, but it provides a structure to designate the representative, and importantly, a threshold after which the union gets access to information about the workers across industry. And it also allows for worksite by worksite union representation. That is, it doesn't foreclose that. It's a complement to that. Last question is, isn't this preempted by the NLRA still exists? And the answer is probably for most workers now that the NLRA continues to limp along is yes. But this proposal does two things. One, it acts like a trigger legislation. That is, it would come into effect for all workers at the point that the NLRA is no longer effective, right? And it covers a whole bunch of workers. It potentially, if the state would cover a set of workers not covered by the National Labor Relations Act, like domestic workers, gig workers, farm workers, other independent contractors. So it is a powerful model, and I am managing that states are going to pick it up.
Excellent. Patricia, tell us what's coming in the future.
Well, picking up on this idea of state regulation and how do we create models of worker empowerment at the state level, I think where this is going to become critical is on how we go about regulating artificial intelligence in hiring and in workforce displacement. And, we have had little action from the federal government about how do we create a system in which you're actually tracking the displacement from AI in different industries. But in hiring, we're seeing it being so dramatic. So what are the models and how can states regulate this industry? I think is going to be important. I just had a meeting with friends from the Singaporean labor movement. And Singapore, as you know, has been well advancing in technology in the use of AI. And they have been able to negotiate. Of course, Singapore is a different government, it's a different system, but they have been able to negotiate these employee union management arrangements of if there's job displacement in a factory or in a workplace, that the union receives remuneration to be able to retrain the workers, but the union receives it, not the employer or not an independent, not an agency. So I always think about how do we learn from our other labor movements around the world to figure out how we can actually regulate AI and the great impact that it's having in our economy. So I think that we need to look out for that. There's some exciting opportunities there, and we can no longer ignore that area of employment growth.
Excellent.
And displacement.
Excellent. AI's impact is not well understood because it's very, very hard to know exactly what it's going to be, but we know it's going to be dramatically disruptive. No question about it. All right, Michael, you're a soothsayer. Tell us what sooth is coming our way.
Well, I mentioned I was edgy, so I don't want to go on a rant here, but Seth, if I go too far, you just rein me in and tell me, we got to cut you off. But I feel like in that movie with Bruce Willis, where the kid could see dead people, that I am focusing on an issue that no one seems to want to raise. And that is with this unconstitutionality of the National Labor Relations Act, that the one set of workers that is really going to be harmed by this are administrative law judges. No one's talking about what the impact is for them. I see comments now about the NLRB board. Oh, it's nice. We're going to have 3 Republicans. And yes, we put Prouty back in there as the Democratic person. Business as usual. They'll reverse all the Biden board decisions. But what about those administrative law judges? In the first part, I talked about if you sever or not sever, which means either you believe that you can go on without having to change the law, but it still means that those ALJs can be terminated at will. And if you say you can't do it without severing, you're waiting for Congress to change stuff and make it so that you can terminate those administrative law judges at will. My kind of concern is over the next year or so. What does this mean for those administrative law judges? These are civil servants. These are not political appointees like the NLRB members. And what does it mean for the rule of law when you say, I'm going to go in front of an administrative law judge? This is the person who's going to hear testimony, make credibility determinations, and have to be worried about the fact that if I issue a decision, maybe it's something on a novel point of law that is not clear, kind of like what happened with Home Depot in terms of Black Lives Matters protests. What's going to happen with an administrative law judge who feels like, I just can't even hear this now because I might be subject to being terminated? What does that say about the NLRB as a place you can go? And I'm not even just talking about it from President Trump, as Ann LaFazzo alluded to in your last Power Work. It could be President AOC who does this. It really is about what does the NLRB, what is the end game in terms of what this means for the function of the NLRB? That's really my concern over the next years. When President Obama, for the first time, had 5 NLRB members at one point, I spoke as a keynote speaker to the administrative law judges. And these, like I said, caring civil servants who want to do their jobs. And now, kind of like how we feel about arbitrators sometimes, where we question, are they biased one way or another? Now you're going to worry about, is the administrative law judge feeling like they can't really assess the law in a way that's not going to please the president? That's my concern.
A very important issue to raise, and I'm really glad you did it. Okay, we've reached everybody's favorite topic of the day. It's shameless plugs and shout-outs. We're already out of time, so everybody, we're just going to ask you to take a minute to a minute and a half to do your shameless plug or shout-out. Let me just say, I know all 3 of you have come prepared for this segment. All right, Patricia Campos-Medina, what is your shameless plug or shout-out?
I'm going to do a shout out to my colleague, Kay Perfenbrenner. I was reading an article in Jacobin this morning about her life in the labor movement, in academia, the research that she did that impacted and transformed union organizing. I worked with her. I was a student, but then to learn all that she has meant for labor education. I think that all of us who care about training the next generation of labor leaders, I should read this article on the Jacobin, should learn from Caper from Brandon. She's still around and she's part of the show sometimes, but I just want to elevate that story. And one piece that is in there that is important is how important labor education connected to universities it is to advance independent research that elevates union issues and that trains union leaders. And so to me, that she elevated that because, the universities are acting like a corporate business sometimes, and our labor programs are on the attack all the time. We have to work really hard to get them funded. We get public support and ILR. They support our work, but all of us who are in the business of supporting labor leaders should support our labor education centers, and I think that's what Cable from Brandon lifted up in this article. So that's my shameless shout out to a colleague that has been a mentor to me.
Absolutely. Everybody at Power at Work is a card-carrying member of the Cape Bronfenbrenner fan club. No doubt about it. Michael Z. Green, what is your shameless plug or shout-out?
All right. I feel shameless that when we do this, I'm always talking about myself, but I repeat that process again. The last time I gave a shameless plug, I talked about the fact I had 3 articles in 1 year coming out, and I was very happy about that. That last article is called Black Labor Matters. It's in the American University Law Review. It just came out last month. It's 75 American University Law Review 1219. And I build upon the issue of attacks on organized labor and Black workers and how they can provide coalitions. This now leads me to my next big research subject, which I'm going to be covering at the conference called COSEL. Liz has been there sometimes. I don't know if she'll be there, and Seth too, which is the colloquium on scholarship and employment and labor law, will be held at Berkeley coming up in September, on September 18th. I'll be presenting there my new topic, which I'm looking at workers' rights to deal with what I call a retaliation by outside third parties, where either federal government, state government, or private actors are trying to coerce their employers to capitulate to, and through vexatious litigation, capitulate to certain practices that are retaliation against those workers and what rights these workers might have. And I'll be doing that at COSEL, and then the following week on the 25th at the Alabama Law Review Symposium.
Excellent. Liz Ford, what is your shameless plug or shout out?
My shameless plug is that I have an article coming out in the Journal of Criminal Law and Criminology, a new place for me to be, but it's about police exceptionalism in state law collective bargaining and demonstrating that we have a two-tiered system of bargaining, providing substantially more rights for police unions than every other type of union, suggesting some ways to think about remedying that.
Well, I'm really embarrassed that our panelists aren't taking on any of the really controversial issues in our society. Police, race, TPS, immigration. I'm ashamed of all of you. You're not welcome back. No, I'm kidding. We can't wait to have you back. For Elizabeth Ford, Michael Green, Patricia Campos-Medina, and our producer, Ayush Kanvolkar, thank you for joining the Power Half Hour. Hey, audience, stick around for overtime. We're going to get to your questions if you have any. We have some questions ready to go. But in the meantime, stay powerful. All right, everybody, take a breath, take a sip of something, whatever cocktail you're drinking at this time of day. And we will, Ayush will post our questions in the chat. I will take responsibility for reading them to you. Audience, before we get started, let me just remind you that you can send questions to us for overtime by email. If you're with us right now, you don't have to do it by email. You can just post it on LinkedIn. Ayush will go over to LinkedIn and keep an eye on the comments, and he will bring any questions you have over to here. But if you would like to send us an email for our next panel, you can send it to poweratwork@theburnscenter.org. That's THEBURNES.org, burnscenter.org. And we'll save up your questions for next time. But now we have some questions that are, I'm just going to start from the top, that are from our email to us by our community. Boy, this is a really big question. What can we expect from the Democrats with respect to workers and unions if they win the midterms and take back the House and Senate? Patricia?
I can get started because I think that it's a lot of excitement with pro-working families candidates running. I think that, what the moderate Democrats call the socialists, I call them working family champions, because what they are asking is for opportunity to demand that government works for working people. So there's a lot of excitement, a lot of candidates that are coming in. We already have champions for working families who got elected. So we will see a lot more pro-worker, pro-union legislation being offered. And the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party actually demanding and holding the speaker, whoever ends up being the speaker of the House, accountable. We already have, Congressman Norcross from New Jersey actually was able to pass a legislation that actually is essential to move forward with some sort of labor law reform. And he was able to get Republicans to sign on to his bill, and he passed the House. And so that's an example of how even in some Republican circles, there is an excitement to look and sound and be more pro-worker. And so I think there'll be a lot of opportunity, but none of these changes if the grassroots doesn't stay active and we don't push the Democratic Party to actually live up to his commitment to working families. Remember, Donald Trump, with all the commitments he made to workers, he sold them a bag of goods that was fake, right? So, but he was pushing things that he wanted to deliver. Now it's going to be the turn of the Democrats to do the same thing. And I think it's our job as activists on the ground to hold them accountable. But I see a lot of promise when we win in November.
Michael or Liz, you want to jump in on that question?
Michael, do you want to go?
I was just going to say, I actually don't see much change. I think what if you have a Democratic-led Congress, that at least what it will do is be a check on some of the actions that are going on, but you still have the unitary executive out there to veto or not sign any legislation. And I don't think you'll get a, Senate that will be able to get past the numbers you will need to pass any legislation, but it'll at least be a check, and it'll be an opportunity to put policies in front of the president that are much different and a check on the president. But I don't see any change happening in regard to any legislation.
Yeah, and I guess I'll come down kind of in the middle there. I really appreciate the idea of making visible the disconnect between the sort of assertions, promises made by the Trump administration to certain parts of the sort of working class, and the utter failure to do anything. And I do think that the new Congress is going to have its hands full with oversight, as it well should. And demonstrating some of the flagrant, unlawful, unethical, immoral behavior by this administration. Right? So that's a lot of work to do. And at the same time, how can we take this moment and build momentum at the grassroots to incrementally make workers' lives better? For example, the Department of Labor is a really powerful, the Wage and Hour Division is a very powerful organization if it is allowed to do the job. Could we take this moment of making things transparent to bolster their abilities to get them some more money? Same to some extent applies to the National Labor Relations Board. How can we take this moment? So my expectations are more muted, but I really like the vision. I love.
And I'm gonna, yes, because I do feel like I'm a political scientist and a social movement academic scholar, so I'm always looking at like how movements are active and changing what is possible, and I think that's what's happening at this moment. It's like the other end of the pendulum. We had seen the worst of a president who had no check and balances. And I think the American public wants some check and balances on the executive. And I agree with you, Michael, that we won't be immediate change. But I think that the extreme abuses that we had seen, they're going to be tempered, and there's an opportunity to at least begin to talk about raising the federal minimum wage. I wish a lot of the progressive Democrats already have bills proposed there to actually begin that conversation. And I think in general, if the social movement continues, we can get there. We can actually increase the federal minimum wage, which will be an immediate bump to millions of workers in this country.
Yeah. So I'll agree with everything everybody just said, and I'll take the opportunity just to say what I hope will happen, given that Donald Trump is never going to sign any pro-worker legislation. Let's not kid ourselves about that. He is rabidly anti-union, rabidly anti-worker. So what do Democrats do in that context? Now, there are going to be fights over appropriations. My bet is that there will probably be at least one government shutdown in the second half of Donald Trump's term, because Democrats will try to force him to do a bunch of things he doesn't want to do, and he will shut the government down by vetoing those bills. But here's what I would like to see happen, building on the energy that Patricia was talking about with folks from the left coming in, pro-worker candidates. And let me just say, there's a huge pro-worker, pro-labor caucus, a labor caucus in the House of Representatives, more than 100 members, very enthusiastic group of folks with a great leadership, many of whom are union members. So what should they do, given that they're not going to be able to pass the PRO Act, given that they're not going to be able to necessarily pass even an increase in the minimum wage? In the House, I would like to see the Democrats demonstrate to the American people what it means for Democrats to be in charge, or what it means to have a pro-worker majority, including hopefully some Republicans, in charge of the House. What bills could they pass? A higher minimum wage, the Faster Labor Contracts Act that you were talking about, protections for heat for workers, defending OSHA as it tries to get a heat standard out, or maybe mandating a heat standard. A long list of pro-worker legislation, worker empowering legislation, even if it's not going to pass the Senate because of the filibuster. pass it in the House to show the American people what a pro-worker power majority looks like and what it could get done. Because, and let me just say, I say this aspirationally, not because I know it's going to happen. This will not be the last election, right? Hopefully, right? And so there's 2026, but there's also 2028 and 2030 and 2032. Let's be clear about what being for workers as a member of the House, a member of the Senate means, and vote on it. And if the Republicans want to be against it, if Donald Trump wants to, or if anti-worker representatives, not necessarily Republicans, but some of them are pro-worker, if they want to vote against it, if Donald Trump wants to veto it, fine. That's their argument. The argument of the pro-worker majority should be, we will make your lives better. We will address things like affordability, like workers' rights, like raising wages, like ensuring that workers have good quality retirement and strong Social Security. There's a long list of things that can get done, at least for agenda setting purposes. Okay, next question. And Patricia, they knew you were coming, so they have a question here. It's building on your earlier comments about TPS. What has happened to all the workers who had TPS status after the Supreme Court decision allowing Trump to deport them?
There's already cases of workers with TPS from Venezuela, from the other countries that have received deportation orders or are in ICE detention or in process of deportation. We are the National TPS Alliance, which is the organization that work with the 17 countries that had TPS. They're monitoring the situation and see at what level of aggressiveness actually DHS engages in actual picking up and deporting workers. Remember, DHS has all the information on TPS workers because they have to register every year. So they have more information on them and where to find them. So, but there's some have been deported. There hasn't been a massive effort to do it. What has happened though is that these workers that were once legal are now being forced to work under the table, are being forced to take other jobs that perhaps allow them to be on the underground economy. And that's impacting not just their lives, but the economy. There's cases of DHS sending letters to employers telling them that they are liable for hiring workers whose permit has ended, and that creates confusion and fear with employers as well, who don't want to be in the crosshairs of ICE. So there's legal advice being given to those employers as to how to proceed, and then advice on how to get these workers to enter a process of legalization, which there's not that many options. So we will see. Haitian workers were the courts actually ruled recently that they are set for deportation. We will see how DHS react. And what the unions have been doing and the immigrant rights community is doing is just trying to keep this community organized and informed about what their rights are. But it's a very precarious situation for TPS workers, and we all have to be in solidarity with them as they figure out how to stay home with their families. Because remember, it's not just them; they're parents of American citizens. They're parents of children, and there's instances already of workers who have been deported to Guatemala with their children, and then they're suffering, and the children being left behind in their country who are American citizens. So this is just going to get worse and a big disruption for our community. So.
Yeah, and let me add one macroeconomic point to everything you just said that I completely agree with. From July of 2025 to July of 2026, the American economy lost 1.3 million workers. What I mean by that is there were 1.3 million fewer workers in the United States, working people in the labor market in July of 2026 than there were in July of 2025. That is not how you grow an economy. That is not how you make people's lives more prosperous, right? And some of those may well have been TPS workers, although I think the decision came out fairly late in the Supreme Court's term, so it may have been a little too soon. But even the mayor of New York, who is as pro-worker as you can possibly be, has had to send an order out saying that New York City agencies cannot employ Haitian TPS workers anymore because DHS has said that they are no longer eligible to be in the United States. And so more and more good quality workers, people who are contributing to our economy, who have been contributing for years or decades, for a very long time, are having to leave our country or being forced out of their jobs, at least, even if they stay in the country. That is not a recipe for growing the American economy, for creating jobs in the American economy. It is not producing more jobs for native-born workers. We're seeing no evidence that native-born workers are getting more employment, that their employment rate is going up. What we're seeing is a stagnant economy, and we are seeing a shrinking and stagnant labor market. We lost jobs in July of 2026. We've had an extremely slow rate of growth of jobs over the course of the last year. It is disturbing, both on a human level in the way that Patricia is talking about it, but it is also devastating for our economy. So I just wanted to add that point in, if you don't mind, Patricia. Let's go on to our next question. Well, this is a sort of very pointed question. Actually, let me do this one first. I'm sorry, I took them out of order. I'll leave this to Liz and Michael. I think this is probably more for you. Are there big Supreme Court decisions that are coming soon that will affect workers and unions? So let me just say, before you all answer that, the good news is the Supreme Court is out of session. And they're all off taking their European vacations on not all of them are on billionaires' yachts, but some of them are on billionaires' yachts, I'm sure. We all know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention any names, Justice Thomas. And but they're gone. And so justice is safe until the first Monday of October when they come back. So are there big Supreme Court decisions, let me put it this way, looming, Michael and Liz, that workers and unions need to be thinking about?
I'm hoping, Michael, that you'll start because
I was gonna say I hope Liz will start. I don't really remember anything that's on the docket that was like pending where they'd accepted cert that was going to raise some major issues. I think most of the work was done with the slaughter decision in terms of where that goes for workers' rights and really the unitary power, the unitary executive power, right? So that basically allows the president to push forward with a lot of the policies and using the agencies. And as I was talking about with my next project is kind of weaponization of those agencies to go after their employers, the workers' employers, and get them to agree and capitulate rather than be subjected to litigation. Is one of the pressing issues. But I can't think of a Supreme Court case that I know is pending, although I think the president has, even with cases where he lost, he said he's going to find other ways to get these issues back in front. So that may happen. I am also, last thing I'll say about this, I am still wondering about the cases that involve all of the attacks on the federal workers and getting rid of the collective bargaining rights, and whether those cases actually get up in front of the Supreme Court or not.
Yeah, those are, as I understand it, those cases are largely still at the district court level. Some of them have gone up to the Court of Appeals level on preliminary injunction appeals, right. And some of them have come back. So like the Ninth Circuit remanded a case back. So those cases still have a long way to go before they get to the Supreme Court. And it's entirely possible that they survive the Trump administration.
Yeah.
So we'll see what President AOC does with those. Liz, do you want to jump in on that one?
I'm not having more like detailed memory about what cert petitions have been accepted, but I do feel like there's at least one about agency authority, and specifically, I think, about the ability of the either the Solicitor of Labor or the Wage and Hour Division to impose remedies or impose penalties on employers. I do think that there has been a case, a case that is sounded ominous to me about constricting that authority. I believe also we have cases about the authority of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's administrative law judge cadre to issue decisions that are binding on employers, particularly federal government employers. And so I think that's coming. I do think that there's, and I again apologize, I think there's at least one that's a big deal for the labor.
I do want to say I thought there was something about Title IX that may come up in the next term that might affect workers.
Yeah, let me just say, I don't want to use this as an opportunity to geek out on the FTC versus Slaughter decision, which is the decision that said that President Trump has the authority to fire leaders of executive what had heretofore been considered independent agencies like the Federal Trade Commission and the NLRB. But Michael, my own reading of the Slaughter decision is that the court did not take a position on whether that includes firing ALJs.
Right.
And the president's authority to fire these folks, which is not in the Constitution, by the way, for those of you who own a Constitution, go take a look at Article 2. It doesn't say the president can have unlimited power to remove executive officers, but the power to fire is partly tied to the power to appoint. And the power to appoint is only with respect to executive officers, not more junior officials. So there's an old case called Morrison, where more junior officials are not subject to the president's power to remove. And so it's not entirely clear to me, although there's every reason to be fearful of this, that ALJs can be fired by the president if they are given protection by Congress, if they're given just cause protection or lifetime appointments or whatever it is that Congress does. So that's, to me, unclear, but ALJ should be worried because now their independence is really, really at risk. Okay, let me get to the last question because we're very short on time. Since the federal government doesn't care at all about workers, are the states stepping up? Are they helping? Are there examples of states doing progressive things to build worker power? Liz and Patricia, you're both nodding. So, but very quickly, just 2 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, give two examples, and then Patricia, you give two examples.
Yeah. All right, we're just going to tick them off. Okay, Seth, you described what's happening in California, Massachusetts, New York, and then we can say, there are states that are looking and have already looked at sectoral bargaining in the domestic worker space, in the gig worker space. So those are my examples. There's so much more. Yes, but this is where I believe.
Go ahead, Patricia.
I want to plug my own state of New Jersey that have one of the strongest independent contractors rules that is being challenged by Amazon and Uber. So there are states that are stepping in to try to raise the standards, for these workers. California in the restaurant industry created these standards more around wages for fast food workers. That's another example of how states are stepping in when the federal government is failing to raise wages for workers. So yes, and a lot of activities happening at the state level. Even Texas, there's a lot of activity raised to increase wages and to protect workers from heat. So I think that's what we're gonna have to do, just like what we did with the race for 15. That we went to the states and we got the states to increase it, and now that's the expectation of every worker that you at least should get $15 an hour. So I think the states are stepping in, and we're going to continue to support those movements.
Yeah, and let me very quickly say not just states, but also cities. And let's shout out the New York City Council, which is considering the Delivery Protection Act, which is directly aimed, not directly aimed only at Amazon, but would have effects on Amazon. And there are many things that law would do. But one thing that it would do is to require that those drivers, those delivery drivers, last mile delivery drivers who are currently treated as independent contractors because they are, or they're treated as subcontractor employees, must be employees of the principal employer. And so Amazon is going to have to employ those truck drivers if the Delivery Protection Act passes in New York City, assuming the millions of dollars of litigation effort that Amazon will launch to stop the Delivery Protection Act are not successful. But that is also, there are a lot of opportunities for cities to get in the game, not just states. Okay, we are completely out of time. Thank you again, Michael, Liz, Patricia. Always fantastic to see you. Audience, thank you for sticking with us through overtime. We will see you again in 3 weeks, not 2, 3 weeks, Tuesday, September 8th at noon Eastern Time. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Power
Happy Labor Day, everybody.
Happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day. Are you looking for more labor radio shows and podcasts? Well, look no further. Go to the Labor Radio Podcast Network. The network connects more than 200 radio shows and podcasts. To find more great labor content, go to www.laborradionetwork.org. Power at Work is there. You should be too.